Hi, I'm Adam Geller, founder and CEO of EdDina, and thanks so much for joining us for this episode of PL Together Lounge Talks. Today, we are joined by Bob Lenz. He is the CEO of PBL Works, and he also has a background a lot closer to schools, not just an organization, as he helped actually start a network of schools in the Bay Area. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, for those of our viewers who are unfamiliar with PBL Works, I guess give them the high level. What does PBL Works do?
Yeah, PBL Works. Some people might remember our family name, parent name of Buck Institute for Education. We've been around for over 30 years. We're recognized as the worldwide leader in project-based learning. We're a professional services organization, so we create tools and resources, one of the leading leaders in the research of building the evidence base for PBL. And then we also provide previously a lot of in-person professional development, and now lots of online professional development for teachers, school and school district or charter system leaders.
Very interesting. Well, we'll talk more in detail about what project-based learning is, I'm sure, in our conversation today. But before we get into that, let's, I guess, start on a high note. There's so much change happening and lots of, for lack of a better word, discomfort with how much we don't know. But I think there's a lot that we can take comfort in. So what's one of the things that you've heard about recently related to an educator adapting his or her practice with students that's, I guess, really inspiring you and exciting you?
Well, it's not so much one educator, it's the hundreds of thousands of folks who are adapting as fast as they can to meet the needs of their students. And just this week, we're in our new weekly webinars. And part of the inspiration is we can only hold 300 in a webinar, and each week we have 1,400 teachers from across the world who are logging in, trying to get as much help as they can to move project-based learning online. This week, we're actually featuring teachers who've been doing that. And, every time I hear their stories, this is an emotional time. I start to get really choked up because they are working really hard to adapt what they're pretty darn good at in person to creating really engaging learning experiences that meet the kids where they're at, it's culturally responsive, in their homes. And so we're going to feature many stories, several stories this week in our webinar, people to see. One of the things that we hear over and over again is how teachers who already had a practice of project-based learning are having an easier time right now and in transitioning, because project-based learning really naturally fits with this time where you're getting a small amount of time with students, and then you're asking them to be self-directed in their learning, do some research, do some design, create products, share their learning and prep for that. Making the transition, if you haven't been doing that, is quite difficult. For the PBL teachers and their students, nothing's natural about this time, but it's a little bit more natural than having to figure out how you stay motivated doing worksheets, reading textbooks, completing packets.
Yeah. I really like that picture you painted of, the inspiration is that, I think that educators on the whole, right, they're not sitting by waiting for somebody to tell them, this is the answer, right? Like they're answering the call of the moment and making sure they're as best as they're able supporting their students to help continue them on their learning trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the kind of adapting of the process and a little bit about what that learning might look like and why with students at home, PBL could be a powerful tool for teachers. I mean, maybe it makes sense to kind of define what is project-based learning, and it has that word project in it. How is it different than just doing a project?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. Um, well, we've been when I joined PBL Works 5 years ago, we had just launched a really seminal work for us, seeing that we're the leaders for PBL, in a book called Setting the Standard. And in that book, it's really been driving all of our professional services now. We defined a gold standard project-based learning design and gold standard teaching practices. So the design, they each have 7 elements, with an 8th one in the middle, which is that you're starting with learning goals. What students' academic content skills, what success skills students have, and what are the key understandings, the sort of pieces to say of what it's like to be a scientist. And around that, you think about your design. So everything from the sustained inquiry. So project-based learning starts with a question, and it's completely authentic. This is where project-based learning really is a great tool for racial equity, in the sense that you can be really culturally responsive to students and thinking about the questions that you're asking, the products that they're creating. The work has an opportunity that question is challenging. It's intellectually challenging. Students are getting pushed. It's not an easy answer. It's not a what we call dessert project, where you're creating a cube of the California missions, or a solar system with styrofoam balls. You're actually creating making your own knowledge, learning the real content that's out there, and answering your question. Students have choice, so there's opportunity for your kids to make choices in that. There's lots of opportunity for critique and revision. Students and who are engaged in PBL get really good at both taking feedback on their work and giving feedback, using a rubric or some other standards been set, sometimes maybe an industry standard or standard outside the classroom, to give each other feedback both on their research, but also on the products that they're creating. And the work is public. So we call it a public product. So now it's almost easier to make it public, because everybody's going public, and you can really open up these exhibitions of learning beyond your classroom. It's one of the pieces that I think is one of the most powerful parts of high quality project-based learning, is when learners know that what they're creating has an audience beyond the classroom, they engage and invest their full selves in that. When teachers say, well, the kids just don't care about the work. Well, they know the audience isn't really compelling to them. It's not authentic, and they know it's just going to get like some marks on a paper, and then it goes into a grade book and it's away. Right. But if you're creating a product that actually matters, or somebody might actually use it or has expertise, most people, it's just human. You don't want to, you really don't want to look like you don't know what you're talking about. Right. And then finally, and this is the key, and all the data suggests it, is that reflection, opportunities for metacognition, both verbally and writing, both individually and in groups, and early and often, not just at the conclusion, but especially at the conclusion, is how the learning gets transferred to new situations. So students who are engaged in project-based learning, who are in the habit of reflecting on their learning, they're not only self-directed now, they're also self-aware learners.
It's interesting, the idea of public. I really like that you defined that there, because in my mind I was like, now, is this public to the classroom? Is this public to the school? But it's like, no, beyond this learning community, that the thing I'm doing and the thing I'm creating has an impact and value in the world. And that's why I'm investing my time and energy as a student into this. For those that are interested, I know that you can see a diagram of the kind of sphere. I don't know what you call it. You probably have a special name for those diagrams, but I know they're on your website.
Yeah.
Yes, that diagram, oh, it flipped out for a second,
Oops.
but I was gonna say, if people want to see that diagram right there, go to
Mhm.
pblworks.org. They're right there on the website. So if you're wanting to see those in more detail and use those as a guide, they're right there and they're available. Um,
You
we're
want to add one resource also for teachers that want to make their work public. There's a website called shareyourlearning.org.
hmm,
And they're actually holding a virtual exhibition of student work. And so teachers from all over the country, all over the world will be, and their students, most importantly, the students, will be sharing their learning through projects that they've been doing virtually these last couple months.
got it.
So they can get a
It's
sense
really
of
interesting.
what that looks like.
Yeah, it's not only the outlet and the end goal, but for the students, but it could also serve as a great resource to inspire teachers as they're designing some of these new projects
Exactly. Exactly.
for a new context. Maybe not for the first time if they're experienced PBL implementers, but certainly for the first time in this context.
Yeah.
Um, well, I know we're planning to have more than one of these lounge talks. So, maybe for our final question today, kind of thinking more at that kind of um, system level, kind of, so not necessarily at the implementation level, but drawing back just a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of folks are wrestling with, you've got a lot of students at home, a lot of time, like you even hinted at, where they need to be independent learners. We've got a lot of challenges about connecting a curriculum and applying that to the real world every day of the year in a normal year, but now even more so when we're not in schools. I mean, should system leaders be thinking about PBL and project-based learning as, I mean, it's certainly not a silver bullet, but could it be a key part of the strategy that they're developing as we plan for the potential for schools to be closed, maybe on and off for some period of time?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, as you can imagine. We've seen, we in our approach with districts and even teachers and schools, I would say we've been taking an incremental approach. We'll say, hey, you don't have to make your whole school PBL or your classroom all the time. Let's start with 2 high quality projects a year. Because if that happened K through 12, that would be 13 years and 26 projects of increased complexity. And that would be a big step forward in engaging kids, getting them a sense of who they are as learners and preparing them for the future. Because we felt like, you don't want to completely disrupt people's education. Well, education has been disrupted completely. And I think 3 big tenets that we've used to help kids comply with learning: seat time, Carnegie units, not applicable right now. 2, test in the classroom, test for accountability, not happening right now. Grades, most schools are moving to a pass fail, no credit. So the 3 things that really kept kids in, and then now you send them home and you say, hey, you should do this work. You should fill out these forms and read this stuff that doesn't really matter to you. And I think for both the experience for the families at home of being frustrated trying to get kids to engage in that, and at school going, well, what, I guess, what, kids aren't doing their work. Which, by the way, many of them weren't doing that work when they were in school as well. So as we think forward, I think a project, especially with schools opening and closing, or even what we're hearing a lot of is sort of a hybrid model in California, where maybe you'd have half the kids come in the morning and half in the afternoon, or maybe odd even days. So they're going to have to be given assignments and tasks and challenges that they need to take home and work on independently, or maybe using Zoom or other tools doing breakout work. So the sooner that school systems and school leaders start thinking about building capacity for their teachers to facilitate high quality project-based learning experiences with a distance in mind, and if it doesn't end up being distance, then heck, it's going to be great for kids in the classroom too. It helps deal with the cultural responsive piece on the equity. Kids are going to need their social emotional needs tended to, this has been a traumatic experience for everyone. And finding a way to engage them in learning is a great therapy.
Mm.
Putting them in classrooms and rows and pushing them to do compliance-based work after this long break is going to be really challenging unless there's some hook for them that's going to engage them, that gets them thinking, I want to learn more about that, so I'm going to do the reading.
Yeah.
That's where we have to go. And the sooner that systems start doing this, that's why we're like, we've had 3 partnerships already with school districts that have come to us and said, hey, can you start working with our teachers online right now this summer? Because we want to be ready when whatever happens when we come back. And we
It's
really think that most people should be whether it's project-based learning or another deeper strategy for engagement, school systems and school leaders need to be thinking about that right now, like starting to make the pivot from the dealing with the current crisis to sort of thinking about the scenario of the future crisis when schools are back or sort of back.
Yeah, I think it's, if I were to summarize, it's almost like you're saying, uh, what we really need is to think about structures that enable flexible learning, and project-based learning is kind of out of the box a way of planning learning that can afford you great flexibility. And so that's
Exactly.
why they seem to almost be like a really great match in this moment, because you've got a need for flexibility and a learning mode that supports and encourages flexible ways of learning. So very interesting to hear.
Well said, Adam. Thank you.
Hey, I'm just doing the listening here. You're doing the hard part and actually teaching me. Well, Bob, let's we're going to go ahead and wrap up this conversation, because we want to keep these lounge talks short for folks, just like they popped into the teachers lounge. Of course, they're not doing that anymore. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll definitely have you back to continue the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Adam.